going to be reading the chat so she can bring the questions to you guys. And if you need anything, please reach out to us. And hope you have a great session.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. And I appreciate all of you as speakers who decided to go ahead with the show. The show must go on. And again, I thank Paloma as well. But you were in the process of introducing yourselves, I believe.
Yeah, Jackie, do you want to go next?
Sure, I can go. So I got involved in COP work when Matt Currie and his team had started doing some of that work and had funding and wanted to expand the practice at Able and add some transactional work, and had a great project going on in Dayton that needed legal support. So I've been, my name is Jackie Radebaugh. I'm currently with Jason Wiener PC, a boutique firm focused on cooperative businesses, startups, and social enterprises. We're based in Colorado, but kind of remote first, and have been for years now. And I joined the firm early in January, but had been doing co-op work with Able in Dayton and in the Dayton region for about 4 years, or just short of that, and grown up quite a bit of I guess organizing work around that as well, and incubation. So as I developed that practice, which I didn't have before, I was focused earlier in corporate taxation, nonprofit work, and community land trust. As I joined Able and started working with community groups, starting to organize, I think I became partially a community developer as well, kind of working really closely with COP Dayton in Dayton, in the Dayton region, just kind of trying to figure out what are the steps to get to even be ready to need legal support, or to be ready for legal support to be relevant. So it's been a really fun ride, and getting a little bit more, I guess, specialized in other newer areas right now with platform cooperatives, DAO cooperatives, and kind of more tech focus as well, which has been a very interesting, twist to my traditional, I guess, if we can say, community neighborhood-led cooperative formation. And I'll stop here for now.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask, Matt, have you had an opportunity?
No, I've not.
Okay, go right ahead.
So I'm Matt Currie, and I manage the Housing and Community Economic Development Practice Group at Able, which is a legal services law firm in Ohio, Western Ohio. Our main offices are in Dayton and Toledo. And yeah, I mean, I think the intent of this session is to, well, before I get into that, some of the work that I've done, right? So I got into this work through Gemsey Market and Co-op Dayton, right? So I'm the founding president of the Co-op Dayton board and the current president of the board, and did some of the legal work for Gemsey Market, along with Eric's help at times. So in my mind, this session is going to be, I think, just a way for us to just have a general conversation about how attorneys can support each other and how we can generally support the movement for cooperative development. And I think part of that is trying to figure out how to tie in the private bar into this work, at least at legal aid programs. I mean, I feel like I get involved because people don't have the funds to pay the attorney, right? So they contact us, but I don't want to be the lawyer forever, right? Nor should I be. I mean, they should probably have in their business plan a line for attorneys and, you know, legal assistance. So part of my hope is like that'll come out and be drawn out of this as well. So, and I'll leave it to Eric or Jackie also to maybe talk about what they hope to get out of this session.
First of all, Paloma, I'm going to jump in and say, if anyone else who's joined, Julian, I thought I saw someone else we admitted, wants to introduce yourself and say what you hope to get out of the session before we take it down the road, do so.
I'm happy to introduce myself. Can folks hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, Michael, we can.
Oh, great. Hi, I'm Mike Russell. I'm a senior lawyer with the Legal Aid Society of Cleveland. And over the last couple of years, I've started doing co-op work with groups around the Cleveland area. It started because legal aid wanted to rejuvenate their group representation practice. You know, they're a traditional legal aid organization. Most of their work is individual work. But they once had a robust group representation practice that sort of fell away. They wanted to inject some new life into it. And around that same time, we were introduced to Jonathan Welly of Cleveland Owns, which is our local co-op incubator. And he was looking for some legal work. So we decided to sort of learn co-op law. And I owe a great debt to the other people on this panel, including Eric and Jackie and Matt, for sort of helping steward that process forward. And so what I hope to get out of the panel is to continue to learn from everyone else. You know, since then, we've helped a handful of cooperatives sort of get started in the Cleveland area. A lot of them are still in the getting started phase, but it's been a wonderful learning process. And yeah, I'm here to learn, and I can share our experience with sort of helping some startup groups. But yeah, excited to be here.
Hannah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. I'm Hannah Scott. I'm the program manager of the Center for Cooperatives in the College of Food, Ag, and Environmental Science at Ohio State. I'm also an attorney, and I kind of came at this a little backwards, I guess you could say. I was doing my work as a cooperative developer first. I started that in about 2015. So helping groups who were thinking about the cooperative business model with things like business planning, feasibility studies, just really understanding how other co-ops work, looking at other models. And I saw that it was extremely hard for them to find what I'm going to call useful legal representation, competent legal representation in the cooperative sphere. And I saw how difficult it was for other rural businesses and farms particularly. And I have a personal background in agriculture. So I actually decided to go to law school myself. And I did that in 2017 while I continued doing my co-op development work. And I was recently barred in May. So I'm a new attorney. Thank you, Jackie. I'm a new attorney, and I'm trying to figure out how to kind of integrate that into being a co-op developer at the same time, and learn from all of you who have a lot of experience in co-op development and understand how we can make it so that, you know, new co-op groups, even experienced co-op groups, don't kind of look around with a blank stare when they need legal representation. You know, I want them to understand that they have the ability to find good legal representation in Ohio. So that's why I'm here.
Awesome. Thanks, Hannah. Congratulations on the bar. It's awesome news.
Great news.
So I don't know how many people are in this. We have, I think, 7 that are showing up on the screen that I see. Is there 12 people in this session?
Yeah, and I think I see one of your clients' names on here. I think I see Kenya Baker.
Right.
So maybe
a picture on the list.
So if people want to make a request to join the video, please do that, because the idea of this is a roundtable discussion and not really a presentation. So maybe we'll give you a few, like 30 seconds to do that. And then if you want to jump in and say who you are and what you hope to get out of this, that'd be great also. Hey, Kenya.
Hi, Kenya.
I had to come on since Eric named me.
Called you out as a great potential client for someone who can solve the problem we're here to talk about.
Yeah.
All right. I'm Kenya Baker. I was the outreach director for the Gem City Market project down here in Dayton. And now I'm spearheading the work with Unified Power Community Land Trust and Real Estate Investment Cooperative. And I hope to get out of this session some direction to go in with investment law in Ohio.
Hey, this is Julian. I can chime in briefly. This is Julian Hill. I'm a clinical teaching fellow at Georgetown Law right now in their social enterprise and nonprofit law clinic. So we help with different types of businesses. I spent several years in New York working with worker cooperatives and have brought some of that work to our clinic. And so I'm just here to kind of see what sort of issues you all are thinking about and moving through. I'm here in Ohio. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Julian. Thanks, Kenya, also. Anyone else who's not part of this video talking part want to join us? Or is anyone else just content listening?
Yeah, or maybe put on the chat, folks, who you are, where you're calling from, and your interest in attending or chatting and talking. All that would be helpful.
Let me, while other people are putting in on the chat, pose the problem from my side that Matt and Kenya and Mike have all run into, and I think Jackie may have run into it tangentially. I love doing co-op work. Every experience I've had with the co-op Cincy people has been fabulous. It's been one of the clients I like working best with since I ran into them at the Ohio Employee Ownership Conference. But I've got a problem. I've got the problem that working in a private law firm that is very much for profit, very much has hours targets, I end up doing the work for co-ops, which I can charge out at a lower rate, but only if I get 40 to 45 hours of billing at my full time out. So what I end up doing is I end up doing a lot of co-op work in the evening and on weekends when I can fit it into gaps. The pricing structure for private law firms that do sophisticated corporate work, and especially ones that do employee stock ownership transactions, is not good for either startup co-ops or worker co-ops. I could blow someone's operating budget in about a month for a co-op if I charged my full rate and charged all the time I was doing. So I keep looking for ways to shift, to either do work more efficiently or to shift it to people who aren't under such pressure to generate revenue for their own business. That's kind of the problem. That's kind of why I have tried when I can to make use of Mike, Matt, Jackie when she was at Able, to do more of the work so that I don't have to write a client a bill they can't afford to pay. To put it in contrast, when I do an ESOP deal, when I do an employee stock ownership plan buyout for employees, I end up generating $70,000 to $100,000 of legal fees to get the deal done. That obviously is unsupportable for co-ops.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Eric. So thoughts on what Eric just said? Anyone?
So Eric, I have a question.
From legal.
Oh, go ahead, Michael.
I was just going to say, from legal aid's perspective, right? That's there's the difficulty that Eric was talking about. We can help fill that void, right? Because we have the luxury of not billing our clients. Of course, they have to qualify for services, which isn't a barrier for most startup cooperatives. But we also need more folks in the legal aid space that can do this work, right? We already in Cleveland, we have our hands full with cooperative startups. And that's just in the Cleveland area. I don't even know if we have any outside of Cuyahoga County. And so organizations like ABLE are able to fill that void in Dayton. We need other legal aid organizations in the state to take on this work as well. And nationally, I don't know to what extent legal aid programs nationally really dip into this kind of work. And that's not because I haven't researched it that much. So maybe other programs are doing a lot of this work and I don't know. But legal aid and legal aid type organizations have a big role to play. But they need funding to get these programs off the ground, and they need to learn from people like all of y'all, like I and Catherine, my colleague, who I think is signing on in a moment, did. So to the extent that we can help promote this kind of work to other legal aid programs, we'd love to do it.
Is there, Michael, this is Cynthia. I'm not Paloma. I'm using Paloma's
Yeah.
equipment right now, or her device. But I put in the chat, what are the qualifications for receiving legal aid support?
So our group qualifications are a little bit different than our traditional individual eligibility standards, right? Individually, we can basically assist folks who earn 200% or below the federal poverty guidelines per household. Group work, we look to the group revenue, right? And then there's also a standard applied to, is it a group composed mostly of people who would qualify individually for services, or is it a group that serves people who predominantly would qualify for services?
And a lot of our co-ops would fit that.
Absolutely.
Very much.
Absolutely.
Very much.
So what's your fee structure for that then?
Oh, we don't charge anything. Our bill is
nothing.
zero. Yeah, we're legal aid. So just like with our individual work.
Okay, so are there, looks like there is an opportunity for developing legal aid support.
Absolutely. And there's funding as well. I mean, this work is funded by the Ohio Access to Justice Foundation here in Cleveland via a grant that we received a couple of years ago.
I feel like Hannah is probably also in an interesting situation because you almost function like a pro bono coordinator to some extent, because you develop and then it's like finding who does the work and how you can send people the right way.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask Eric is in my mind, my question is how can co-op developers get groups in the best position to be ready for legal counsel? Because I've had attorneys send me groups that they say, hey, they came to me first, but they're not really ready for me. We think they need help with a business plan before they get to me. So I would just like to pick your guys' brains on how can co-op developers like me, like Co-op Cincy, Co-op Dayton, get a group ready to so that your work with them is efficient and maybe not.
I'm going to pass the buck a little bit and say that Cynthia kind of knows the answer to that, because she and Ellen and Kristen have developed a pretty good model for doing a lot of the training work to figure out if a group will work as a co-op, whether they have the culture and whether they have a good idea of how to buy the business before anyone starts me doing any legal documentation. And then we try and we had a spurt where we had a call that lasted about, I think, an hour and a half, Cynthia, with a group of co-ops that were all working in parallel. And we've now formed 4 of them and maybe 5. T-shirt Apparels is filed with Ohio. I don't know how much follow-up work we've done after that. Where all 5 of them are incorporated, and I was able to work on them in parallel because Cynthia and her colleagues have packaged it so well. That's just a shout out to Co-op Cincy's method.
Well, we definitely appreciate your assistance. It is a process, as you said, and the Co-op U is the process that we've used to get co-ops ready. As Eric mentioned, we only had one co-op that was in question. And one of the things the training did is it helped them understand that they had to have true commitment to this whole process if they were to move forward. And so the composition of the co-op changed. But answering some serious questions, and that's the important thing, to answer those questions. But also to your point, Hannah, I have a question about the going back again to that legal part, the legal aid. Yeah. If you're looking for support there, if you need more people, more attorneys, I presume, or would they be something other than attorneys in terms of profession background? Michael, I'm sorry, I meant to address you.
So, I mean, more attorneys would be great. I think we also need more folks like Cleveland Owns in the Cleveland area, incubators that can provide that sort of the coursework, right? The building work. And I think they do a good job. I don't think they have the, they're not where Co-op Dayton or Co-op Cincy is yet. I think they're still building their capacity on that end.
So, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say Co-op Cincy has been around for about 11 years now. And during those 11 years, I think they've learned a lot and applied, which they've learned, and it's helped. And I'm looking at opportunities for our training to contain even more content, to be more content oriented towards the legal side as well. We can develop that some more. Perhaps do some of the things that may, Eric, once they reach your desk, just require a quick, look over. You can just review it quickly as opposed to having to, set up all
Right.
the different steps. And
Maybe we add a module to your training
yeah,
talking about legal and governance issues so that when they get a set of bylaws, they understand exactly what's there, so that they understand what I'm doing when I'm filing a corporation, what the need for those various pieces of paper is and how they fit together. Add a component, maybe it's an hour, maybe it's a 2 hour, where Jackie or Matt or Mike or I or somebody or Hannah or somebody with that kind of training ghost writes or even co-writes with you all that module so that they see what it is the lawyers are doing and why it's important.
yeah, I think that would be helpful. We already do governance and management, governance versus management. And we introduce bylaws to them. We give them sample bylaws and articles of incorporation. Yet, we also have people who are going through this who are at different levels of understanding anyway. So there's some challenges there, but I do like that idea. I'm sorry, I heard someone else.
Yeah,
I'm supposed to be moderating and I'm taking up all everybody's time.
I was
No, it's great.
I wanted to take a kind of like a couple other angles too. That is, unlike the ESOP work or bigger entity work, deal work, and on my end, to structure a startup co-op is somewhere in between $3,000 and $5,000, right? So it's a lot more accessible in that end, and is a specialized area of law. So I also think there's value, and if there's funding or coming up funding, to allow private attorneys to have access to that funding as well, to support both the work of legal aid doing that, but also to support their work. I think is to some extent unfair to the cooperatives themselves to expect them less than we expect from a startup, a small business, because that's going to impact their success as well. So I think the bar should be about the same, right? Like we provide support and we want to see you successful, and therefore you need to have a straight up business plan, that your financials aspect of the business plan makes a lot of sense. If that doesn't make sense, that's typically when I send clients back to a cooperative developer and say, hey, you need to figure out your money in, money out structure, because if that doesn't make sense in paper, you're going to struggle a lot. And I can put anything, write any legal documents, those will be kind of useless. So I've right, Eric, we can write anything and it shouldn't take too long but from our perspective, but it really needs to match with what the client is trying to accomplish and with how much they understand their project as an actual business. So recently I've been working with a co-op in Cincinnati that is well structured, wants to grow, and didn't have funding for our services. And the SELC had a fund that allowed them to apply. And I think the criteria, because it's kind of like charitable fund as well, it's close to what legal aid would expect. It's like, what's their impact, who's participating in that business, that co-op, to become eligible. And I was able to access that funding on their behalf to cover my legal services. And now I'm available to do their work. And I think that's part of the thing too, is I'm charging a lower rate for that, but at least I'm getting covered on, at least on my cost. The client is getting good legal services and is also learning in that as you grow, you need to have a line for legal services. That's going to happen with any successful business. If you're going to be successful, you need to have some of that. So I think it's kind of like increasing the expectation, providing the support so that they can meet that expectation as well. And you guys do a great job. And in Dayton, I present often with COP Dayton's Incubator program as well on the legal aspects. So I walk them through the type of legal entities. And then sometimes I've drafted for them a year or so ago and have like a few iterations of new bylaws that I kind of like highlighted for them areas of discussion. And then like making sure that they have something up front that the team can work to discuss through, but also understanding that when they come to an attorney, it's going to be depending on where they are and what stage of development they are as a business, regardless of it being a co-op or not. I think it's really important.
One other model I have worked a couple times, and it's been a really nice experience, is instead of representing the co-op or the workers, I've got a seller who really wants his succession plan or her succession plan in one case to be a worker co-op, to be the workers. In one case, the deal came to me where they were starting with the thought they would do an ESOP, but that really wouldn't work. But if you can get the seller to hire a co-op attorney to represent the company that is going to be sold to the workers, sometimes the seller has enough of an incentive in making the deal happen that you can get around the desperate funding needs. That happened to me with a group of chemists in Florida. That happened to me with a bakery in Cleveland, not in Cleveland, on North High Street in Columbus, where the seller really wanted this to happen. Another case where we tried to make it happen was there is a solar panel installer who would love to be a worker co-op if he could work out some of the issues. And he was willing to hire me to teach him how to sell to a co-op. Again, get to the deeper pockets rather than the workers.
Yeah. So maybe can reflect. So Jackie,
there's something going on with your audio, Matt, I believe. Is there anybody else hearing that? You're still breaking up.
Well, proceed with that.
No, you unmuted yourself a second ago. You want to add something to that?
Yeah.
I was going to take this in a little different direction. So if we're not ready to go that way, please feel free to redirect. But something that Eric said and something I've heard from other attorneys is and I think Michael said, learning from each other, learning from experienced attorneys. I've been thinking about how we can transfer some of that knowledge to new attorneys, particularly, or even to law students. So the ways that I'm seeing connections with legal aid, I'm wondering if we can build connections with entrepreneurship clinics throughout the state, right? So UC has one, Ohio State has one, I'm sure Case has one. How can we develop those relationships where perhaps that's another outlet for cooperatives to receive, below market rate assistance, but also teaching new attorneys what this space is like? Does anybody have experience with that?
I think Matt and I tried or talked about that early on. I don't think we've, I wasn't very successful in doing that, but I think you're right. I think that's the way to go. I think it's just, and Julian does that. So I'd be curious to hear from his side. That is, he's in a school, right? Like how how can organizers and developers and then private attorneys get all connected and use that clinic as essentially the place where they meet to distribute, because the clinic we can teach the students, right? But typically those clinics, even the ones that are doing good work already, don't have an attorney that has a ton of expertise. So I think it would probably be in Ohio matching them with me, with Eric, with Mike, to kind of the students to kind of develop that expertise, that the clinic's director also start developing the expertise and then feel more comfortable themselves supervising the students as that growth. But that's how I learned a lot about community land trust. It was with the entrepreneurship clinic at the University of Texas. And so I think there's really value in doing that. We had two students from, I blank now, same school as Julian's with us this semester, and they are doing co-op work there. They're helping develop a grocery store there. So I connect them with Matt here for the on-the-ground expertise. But I think you're right. I think that's the way to go. I think for Ohio, we have enough law schools. That would be great.
Interestingly, I had the experience of having a law school intern in a clinical program work with me on developing a co-op, but that person was working with Ariana down in Kentucky, not in Ohio. And the experience was really frustrating because it's hard when you can't sit down with somebody. This was last year in the pandemic era, and it's really hard to work with a law student where you can't sit side by side and talk to them. I've gotten pretty comfortable talking with Mike and with Matt, but it can be, and I will at some point with Jackie, but it's hard to work over the phone and miss the body English when you're trying to really figure out whether someone gets an idea or not.
I'd be curious if anyone on the call has a relationship with Ohio State and their Center for Cooperatives.
Hannah?
Hannah is the person. This is our connection.
I'm sorry, I may have missed your introduction.
Yeah, she works for. You want to reintroduce yourself, Hannah?
Sure, I manage that center.
Oh my gosh. Okay, great.
But to your point, the folks in Columbus, we cannot get them.
Well, right, yeah. So I'm actually not based in Columbus. I'm based in the College of Food, Ag, and Environmental Science, and so we're actually based in Southern Ohio at a research and extension facility that's actually a research farm. So our work has traditionally focused in rural communities, and we're pretty small. So it's myself and then two other staff members. So we just don't, the same as many of you, we don't have the capacity to be all over everywhere at one time. So yeah, we're trying to figure out how we can increase that capacity.
Do you have any leverage with the law school up in Columbus and say, hey, we'd like to have some of your students working on co-op law or ag law issues?
I wish I could tell you yes, but I can say I can try. So I have not developed a relationship there. So I actually went to law school at Cincinnati, and I do have a relationship with that clinic, a very good relationship with the entrepreneurship clinic there. But I think that there's a lot of opportunity, and in particular, because I'm also a part of Ohio State, it's probably a bit easier for me to start with the law school. Maybe, I don't know. Sometimes law schools are weird places, if we're being honest.
When
Ohio State hasn't made you sign a non-compete or non-solicit that would prevent you from talking to people at Xavier or University of Cincinnati or whatever.
Is my audio any better?
Oh man,
Matt, we can hear you trying, but not.
We still
Is my-
can't.
is that better?
It's just you're breaking up too badly there. But Hannah, you reminded me of something. You referred me to the clinic at UC, and I was wondering how that works. The individual, by the way, Eric, I had BB Babaji applied, for some assistance there for her patent, because she's still looking for patent.
Awesome.
So that's another thing. How do we? Is it possible to have a network of whereby? I mean, is there a place we could go online other than going to UC, other than going to the Ohio State, going one that's uniquely for cooperatives, and legal support around patents, around, whatever.
There
Whatever.
is not on the IT, but on the commercial and business side, I think there are resources I've seen for that, although they tend to be aimed at farmer co-ops rather than at worker co-ops.
I think as we continue to grow, then I could see the need for patent attorneys, more patent attorneys, and they seem to be very, very sparse in terms of their.
Well,
It's not so much they're sparse as that most of the successful seasoned patent attorneys have existing relationships and are in a niche that they're comfortable with and don't tend to go looking to develop more work, especially work for smaller businesses. Mm-hmm. The patent attorneys at my firm that I tried to talk to about that project do a significant amount of work for second-tier auto parts companies that are keeping them busy.
And they are very specialized, but also I don't know of anything within cooperative world that would make it very like a specific area, right? So we are essentially fighting for the same IP attorneys with the same expertise, because it's not like you need to go with to an attorney co-op or IP co-op attorney. They are an IP attorney. And then kind of, as Eric said, like you're competing with big clients that are paying big money. The SELC fellows are a good resource, I think. And also the SELC has a bunch of attorneys, fellows that are part of kind of like this network that are, one, distributed around the country, two, have expertise in several areas and understand very well the cooperative practice. The SELC, the Sustainable Economies Law Center in Oakland, California. So they are a nonprofit law firm. That's kind of, I guess, the leading nonprofit law firm in the country doing cooperative work. That's the bulk of their work. And among the fellows, you're going to find a lot of that expertise as well. So we have, I'm blanking on names today, but have a colleague. Sushil, but we have a colleague in Chicago, Fatima, who IP and copyright, and that's trademark. That's her area of expertise, and she's a cooperative attorney. She's worked with a bunch of on-the-ground groups there as well. So it is a good resource. Cynthia,
Yes.
for your team as well to connect.
I see that Matt's back.
Yeah, is this better?
Much better.
Yes, much better. We can hear you.
The
I'm
other
curious.
thing I would like to see that would help with that, both we mentioned investment issues and securities law issues briefly when we were saying about what we might want to cover, and IP, maybe even environmental for heavy manufacturing, is I'd love to see a setup where we kind of had a small business clinic where lawyers who normally work for gigantic companies at high fees can do some pro bono work in their area, or maybe low bono work by providing specialized services to small businesses through a clinic arrangement where they get some assistance with referral, maybe some grant, maybe some help with liability coverage on specific issues to talk to small businesses that couldn't access a niche specialized lawyer.
Have folks heard of the Ohio Patent Pro Bono Program?
Not yet. Tell me about it.
I'm looking in the
So
chat.
they were set up a few years ago. I briefly worked for the IP Venture Clinic at Case Law School.
Yeah.
After moving to Ohio, and the Ohio Patent Pro Bono Program still exists. I had a role in sort of setting up the application procedure and the sort of IT behind how cases get placed with attorneys. But it's a network of patent attorneys that agree to take cases pro bono. They have no specialized co-op expertise, but it's statewide. And at least while I was there, it was fairly successful at placing low-income inventors or entrepreneurs with experienced patent counsel. I haven't had any experience interacting with them in years, but I mean, I see the website still up. I haven't even explored the website recently, but it's something to keep in mind, and maybe there's a relationship there that we can cultivate that's more specific to co-op IP.
Yeah, it's almost like taking the pro bono partnership for Ohio model and maybe expanding that a bit beyond just nonprofits.
Right. In the beginning, it was hard recruiting patent counsel to volunteer to take cases for the reasons we talked about. But if they've grown since, and I have a reason to think they have, hopefully that network has expanded.
Well,
Can we talk about issues on securities, Michael? I'd love to see
Oh, geez.
kind of the securities bar. And when I say securities, that's people who deal with registration of offers and sales of stock or other equity investments. I'd love to see the securities bar at some of the big firms do something similar. I got one of my colleagues interested enough to try and get him to develop a quote for Kenya on something, on doing a fairly sophisticated project. And he just got sucked into projects for a big Toledo-based company and never came back to me with a realistic answer. But it would be great if we systematically had an outlet for people who do securities offerings, do private placements, who are looking at how can you sell to people other than accredited investors? What kind of disclosure documents do you need to do? What are the traps? If they were willing to provide their expertise to start up co-ops from time to time, especially as Michael and Kenya both know, because it's hard under the legal structures to do community investment, even though it's the most natural thing in the world.
That's something.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
But I was just going to, that's something that I didn't anticipate having to learn when I started this work. And it's ended up taking up a lot of my co-op time, just trying to get a handle on federal and state rules when it comes to securities.
Federal law rules don't worry me, as we talked about when we were on the call with the regulators,
Right.
but the state law rules are nasty, and they get nastier the more states you have employees in.
I'm sorry,
But
Jackie,
it would
go
be
ahead.
great if there were attorneys at Squire Boggs or attorneys at Jones Day who said, I'm a securities lawyer, but I want to do some pro bono work. How can I help somebody?
And I've tried reaching out to those folks individually and through folks who know them and who work with them, and so far haven't been successful.
Or down in Cincinnati, there are probably people at Taft who have the same level of expertise who ought to be saying, how can I give back some?
Jackie,
So-
I didn't mean to interrupt what you were saying.
Oh, no, you're fine. No, I was going to say, and then, there's always, sometimes I feel like they feel uncomfortable with not knowing about co-ops, enough about co-ops. And then we have among the SELC fellows a few that are very few attorneys that are very security focused. So there's always opportunity to develop that expertise on the co-op side with securities co-op attorneys that have a great handle at some state laws and the federal law that can walk those private attorneys through the beginning so they feel comfortable and can be essentially matched to some extent with those attorneys to feel comfortable doing their work in their area and now with this more specialized. But that I think that's a conversation that I had with Matt on and off too, is like, let's how do we make them feel comfortable? And then for me, that since I have been with legal aid, whenever I see a project that is interesting, it's kind of like borderline, they cannot really afford, but everything else makes sense, I will assume that this is I can probably get some pro bono credits for it, get my CLE credits. I will just call Matt or Mike and say, hey, can I do this pro bono work through you? And that I'm interested in. So I think that's also educating the private bar that if there's something that comes to you that's interesting, you can also reach out to the legal aid programs that are doing some of that work and get their support also to find other resources and move forward with that service.
Jackie, that raises a question tangentially that I'm really interested in and other people on the phone might be. I talked about half an hour ago or 40 minutes ago about the problems with working for a big corporate law firm. To what extent do you have more flexibility in a niche but still for profit law firms specializing in co-ops. Are there niche firms out there like yours? Are there opportunities to work with firms your size that are not quite as greedy as mine is?
Well, we have somewhat a commitment to do about 50 hours pro bono per year per attorney around the firm. So there's that. So that's kind of under what I do. I do my work. I don't do my pro bono work outside of my work hours. I do happen to work in a almost essentially self-driven firm. So we have the flexibility to say, I'm not going to work extra hours and I'm doing my 50 extra hours of pro bono within my work time. I think it's kind of working with all those big firms. Let's be honest, all those big firms have pro bono programs to some extent as well, except that they see that as, let's help people with very low income center, individual low income center projects. So I think it's educating their pro bono person to understand that this for-profit activity makes sense within the pro bono program, that they can still do that. Because if somebody calls your team to do a veterans clinic, doesn't everybody kind of jump on it, do that clinic one time, feel good about it? Like, it's not an uncommon thing, right, for bigger firms to do this one-time clinic that assists this one needy population. This is kind of the same thing. It's except that this has a different impact in the community. So I think it's educating those pro bono point person in big law firms that this makes sense. They can have the same CLE and pro bono benefits and have also a big impact in their community. I think it's really about education for me.
Jumping off what you said, Jackie, at the patent pro bono program, part of the reason that we were having such a hard time recruiting private counsel to take these cases is, as you were saying, there's a perception that there isn't a demand for these services among low-income people. That I have a specialized set of skills that I cannot expand to that clientele. I can't use for that clientele. There's no demand there. Convincing them that there is, and that they don't have to go outside of their niche expertise, right? You don't have to go outside of your specialty in securities law in order to provide valuable assistance to low-income people who are trying to, raise money for a project. It's that education as well, convincing folks or making them realize that there's a demand for their specialized services amongst people who can't pay for their work.
And are not lost leaders that are designed to get them in the door someplace else. Some of the pro bono work, at least my firm is encouraged to do, is things that get us in front of other people who might hire us.
Well, that's exactly the point with the cooperatives, right? And that's kind of how I used to sell it when I was a legal aid. It's like, if you think that your work is so relevant that can impact the success of a business, there's a really good reason to work with the cooperative to set them up. That as soon as they can, focus their resources on something else and be successful, you're going to be the attorney that they're going to call, and they'll be happy to pay you because you helped them when they couldn't pay for your services, and now they're thinking of you. That's the first person that's going to come to their mind. It doesn't always work, but sometimes it does, at least to get them started, get them to see that this can work as a kind of economic development project.
Yeah, thanks for the note, Kenya. And I think, go ahead.
Thanks.
You go ahead.
No, I was just going to reiterate, I think, what Jackie was saying, which is, the idea is not for legal aid to constantly represent these entities forever, right? I don't want to represent the GEMC market forever, for example, right? Hopefully they're going to have the ability to pay for legal counsel when they need it, and they should be planning for that for certain issues that I can't, or legal services can't get involved with, right? For example, so.
This may be a question that Jackie has some insights for and Hannah will listen to carefully. But one thing I've thought about is when I was starting to do co-op law, some of the other co-op lawyers I talked to were people who had represented the agricultural co-ops who had started in niche firms doing farmer ag financing, farm succession planning, co-ops. Is there a way we can set up and more firms like Jackie's firm that are servicing the co-op market and have a mixed range of clients, both the startup worker co-ops and some larger co-ops that will make it profitable for them to try and do that niche full time? And the issue I've always had is juggling co-op work among the other things I do, many of which are more lucrative and in some cases just as interesting. It's fun to represent an executive who's been terminated, an executive or top salesperson who's been terminated by their employer. That's juicy. We want to find a way to set up firms where people who are really interested in developing co-ops can do that. How can we create more firms like Jackie's that specialize in co-ops that service the market? And the reason I pulled Hannah in is as somebody with a law degree. At some point, you may want to work for someplace else other than the extension. Where would you go to be a lawyer and use the skills and knowledge of the market you already have? How do we set up the firm that you'd be interested in working with long term?
I think Eric, I think part of it is the training in law school to explain to law students like what it is to actually, how this work is relevant, how it can be positive social change work, but also you can make a living at it.
Yeah.
That's the key in my mind, right? It's like tying those two pieces together.
So get to people very early before they've done a summer internship at Jones Day or Taft.
Right, because I think they still, and I've been encouraging our interns, like before we're hiring, right? And like everybody else, we're having a hard time hiring. But we want them to have a traditional experience in a traditional law firm as well, because our work is with cooperatives is still very specialized corporate work, right? We're dealing with securities every day. We're dealing with all those super complicated things that a lot of people have a lot of money to pay for. So I think there's a good, they should know what a cooperative is. You should learn that in business association classes. You should have that as a common client at an entrepreneurship clinic. And then when you go to do your Jones Day for second year summer, now you're maybe asking around about that. Why are we not seeing that? Is that an option? What you have at least a little background to ask questions around that. And then when you leave law school or when you're looking for your second internship, I've talked to folks in from Minnesota recently, a student at the law school there who does happen to be one of the leading like Hannah's leading cooperative development center. And there's one co-op attorney in their region only that does ag work. So this student is desperate looking for opportunities to get that experience while in law school and then thinking afterwards. I don't know where I was going with that, but I think, but to the point is during law school and also having that in your mind when you're looking for traditional work for the experience, because when you come, you have the principles, you're thinking just in terms of principles, right? That's not a different, I want to help businesses and I want to help business with social impact. I'm still needing to learn very traditional, highly specialized areas of law.
Okay. Hey, in the chat, Kenya, you've really been contributing. Is there anything you want to share with us? You've made some interesting comments, observations. Would you like to elaborate on any of those? Are you good?
Yeah, I had just made the point about, I think that sometimes we get caught up with semantics, but that's like one of the very important things that I learned in education and working with children who had special needs, identifying them as first children and then their disability. And it's the same way with people who have been systemically oppressed. We need to identify them as people first before their condition. And then I just really missed the opportunities that I was being afforded with community lawyering and that concept through ABLE as well as UD Law School, and talking with some of the students that were in kind of that formative stage and hadn't been exposed. I forget the term that Eric used, but I'm sure it's a lawyer thing, but they hadn't been exposed to whatever it is that taints, you know, the human compassion in a person who's seeking to be a lawyer. So I just hope that those opportunities circle back around and I have an opportunity to engage some more, you know, budding law students as well as people in the practice that would be interested in forming a maybe I think that it's really a good idea to have a cooperative law firm. Like, I think that's what we're saying here without actually saying it, but like we need a law firm that's a co-op.
Yeah, that's what I was, saying. I agree.
Well, I don't want to speak, Jackie. You can of course speak to that the best because of your position in your current firm, but I've had experience with, like Eric was mentioning, some of the co-op attorneys I know outside of this space are agricultural attorneys first, and then they're co-op attorneys, right? And I think in a lot of ways, maybe there's value in thinking about being a small business attorney and a co-op attorney, right? Like there's all these skills that go into helping a co-op that are beyond just co-op law. So I think we need to think bigger than that. We need to think about being a business attorney and how we train business attorneys who understand co-ops, because that is, having been in that space recently. I heard the word co-op one time in law school, and it was in a real estate class, and it was one sentence. That was basically housing co-ops are similar to condominiums, and that's all you need to know, right? And there it was. And so, how we can create relationships that help kind of fold co-op law into business law, because if you're a good business attorney, you'll be a good co-op attorney if you can pick up the co-op part.
And I would also add, Hannah, fold co-op law, and I think, Kenya, this goes to what you were saying, fold co-op law into regular community lawyering education, right? Like Hannah, like you said, I'd never heard of cooperatives in law school. I mean, I knew they existed, but it was not part of any curriculum. But I did go to law school with a wonderful clinical program that I learned a lot about community lawyering models, right? And that's really the stuff that got me going. But it did not, there was a limit to that scope of education. It did not address business. It did not address cooperatives. And I was not interested in business law one bit. I was on the opposite end of the spectrum, right? I wanted to get rid of all that stuff. But if somebody was able to teach me at that time that this will be relevant to your work, if you want to work with communities who are interested in building wealth, setting up alternative systems to the oppressive system we know, and creating community, you need to know about businesses. You need to know about how this stuff works. I didn't have that, and I wish I did. And to the extent that we can, fold this co-op stuff, this sustainable economy stuff, this community development stuff all together into community lawyering work and public interest work in general at the law school level, I think it would be wonderful. But, it's a huge task.
Now, Eric, to answer your question on how we can get people to start essentially law firms that do that work, I think what Kenya said about funding, you also do need to start funding or finding ways of funding those businesses, right? Because if we want an attorney to leave all those other opportunities to make money and do this full time, they need to be able to be sustainable themselves, and therefore so helping the small business or startups, the cooperatives, with funding that allows them to pay for this service, allows the attorneys to be interested in opening that as a business instead of just doing that pro bono, right? So I think that's the other piece of education is I don't think we need necessarily to increase, or in the meantime we do, but to increase pro bono access as much as it is finding ways of funding the legal work that the cooperatives need, so that we have more attorneys interested and can make a living out of that, like you would expect from any other area. And
a living wage, at least. I mean,
right, a living wage.
One of the big issues in a law firm is what's a living. There are people who swear they can't survive on less than $500,000 a year. And you're never
Right.
going to make $500,000 a year doing co-op law.
No, they're not. I'm here to tell you, you're not. But you can make a living, right? And like we're hiring, and I've been looking at what other law firms are offering.
Yep.
And when I graduated from Texas, my colleagues were getting starting bonus and between 20 and 60 grand plus their $200,000 starting pay. Now they're getting offered $200,000 starting bonus on top of their 200, 300 salary and their annual bonus and all that. So that's kind of tempting, right? So at least if you get people thinking about the principles while you're doing that, and the fact that you can lead your life in a different way that's not putting all those 2,000 billable hours a month or a year, there you can do a reasonable amount of billable hours, have a decent life, and
not hate yourself when you go to bed at night.
Right. I love what I do, and I don't work more than what I need. I also don't make enough to pay my house every year. and it's fine because I have that flexibility and I have a living wage and I do what I love.
I think it's
Jackie,
interesting.
just to throw a piece on that, you might look at other lawyers my age who have hit the stage where we say our kids are through school. It's not worth it anymore to work that 2,000 hours a year doing IPOs, doing a deal a week. I want to do something that's more rewarding. That's part of what's driven me to do as much work as I can get to for Co-op Cincy, is that it's much more rewarding. It's satisfying. This is what I'd rather do with my life if I have the freedom. But there are lawyers on the other end of their career who we've got to say, as you're cutting back, why don't you keep your hand in your expertise working with a different class of client?
Yeah. Kenny, were you going to say something that I wanted to jump in after Bill on that point, Eric?
Yeah, I was just saying, I think it's interesting about the whole money concept because, I mean, like, I despise money. Like, I'm not, that's not my angle. My angle is like bettering society. And I think that there are people that go into law. It's funny because I initially in college was going to study law. And then I was like, let me help people before it was criminal law. Let me help people before they get in trouble. And I decided to be a teacher. So that tells you I don't care about money. But I think it's interesting if you can find people like, Matt, Jackie, Mike, Eric, you guys are here. People that have, went on in their law careers. Like Michael made the point, let's try to catch them when they're still in school, maybe. Like before they graduate, maybe it's the freshman, maybe it's the sophomore, before they get to that point where the dollar signs start showing up and, they're really going to be driven by money as a factor. And then also recognizing that community empowerment can be lucrative. Like, we should have a compelling argument for cooperatives that's not like this is going to be us continuing in scarcity. Like, really, community empowerment through cooperatives is about abundance. It's just shared abundance.
Shared fairly.
Yes, shared equitably. Yes.
It's, if you want to change the economy, right? Like so many people that go to law school want to do, right? They want to change the world. They want to change these oppressive structures. This is how you do it, what's more socialist than worker cooperatives? Not that, you have to be a socialist to want to do this sort of stuff, but like, this is how you do it.
That's what I wanted to say, Matt, too. I know you wanted to say something. I didn't mean to cut you off, Mike. But that was my thought, though. It's like, for me, you guys have the power to change the condition overnight. But we're talking about how much it costs to do it. That's how it's calculated in my head. That's what I had wanted to say, too. I'm sorry.
Eric, you going to say something?
I was just going to start. I think Jackie knows this. Mike and Matt might know this. But one of the amazing things to me is the ability of large business law firms to change people's personalities and corrupt them. We really want to get people early. I was a union side labor lawyer when I was in law school. I did all my work all my internships, all the thing was training was I would be representing unions. And then I moved to a different city and got stuck doing ESOP deals and turned into a business lawyer or a tax lawyer somehow.
Yeah. So I wanted to maybe shift gears a little bit, I think, but I think it's relevant still, which is, like, Jackie, you mentioned the knowledge issue, right? How do you make sure the lawyers know this area of law? And, maybe we can talk about that for a little bit. I mean, Eric, how do we get people to, know what you know, for example? Or Jackie, how do we get people to know what you know, for example? Same with you, Mike, right? And you, Hannah, right? How do we share the information, share the knowledge, so we are bringing in new attorneys who with the knowledge to do this work?
Well, I'll start by saying, Matt, what I told you. I think we need to get Hannah Center to start interviewing Eric and folks like him. And we have this huge record of let's share your experience. What do you know about such and such topics? Because those centers can preserve that to an extent and can share that to a large group of folks that they are within universities. So that would be, for me, one way of at least preserving, because Linda Phillips in my firm has been doing this work for for 25 years. She's retiring soon as well. How do we preserve all that expertise? I don't know anything about water cooperatives. She's the only person that I know that's done a water cooperative in Colorado. And then now we have a client, brand new startup, wants to do a water cooperative after 20 years of not hearing about it. So kind of how I think you're right. We need to preserve, educate the newer attorneys and preserve the experience of attorneys like Eric and Linda and other folks that are looking into retirement or slowing down, to share that.
Couple things that strike me. One thing you want to do is when you think about preserving expertise, it's not just knowing facts or knowing rules. It's having judgment on how much flexibility there is in rules that look like they're black and white. And that's really training through experience, not lecturing at people. You have to have somebody at your side as you're making a hard decision for them to see, well, gee, you went up this close to the line, but not over. How did you decide where to stop?
And I think that's especially important with this kind of work, right? One of the frustrations, but also one of the things that's most exciting about doing this is there is so much flexibility, and you have to figure out, where the gray area is and how far you can go. From somebody who comes at it new, that can be very scary, right? Because it's not an easy answer, but it's necessary, and it's here. That freedom is here. It's just how to wield it responsibly.
It's funny. I'm going to go all the way back to something that Kenya said, and it relates, I think, to both what you said, Eric and Michael. When I think about, I was at Ohio State for my master's, and I remember being there, and I had a friend who was in law school, and I said, I have thought about law school and very interested, really, but I don't know. It seems like it's going to take a long time. And I said, well, what year are you going to graduate? And she said 1978. And I said, that's too long. I can't wait that long. And I just think about over the years, that was 1978. Had I gone that route, if things would have been different, I don't think a whole lot different. My values have not changed that much. In fact, my awareness, my understanding, and Eric, as you mentioned, the importance of having insight. I wonder, going back to your comment about now that you are an empty nester and you have more time to think about things other than just, the income and so forth. Not that you've thought that way, a lot, in the past, but I wonder how many other people are feeling that way, because I too took the path that Kenya did. It was more, I want to do things to help, better mankind, better the folk who live around me, myself, picking people up, just helping people get out of their circumstances, and also getting folk before they they, having an opportunity to feed into them. So there could be other folk who are like me or like Kenya, who have in the background had a maybe a propensity, for this type of work, around the legal thing, at least the ear for it, or who may want to go back to school, maybe not at my age, but who knows? Would it be feasible for that to happen if a person reaches the age of 50 plus? Is it possible? Because I know back in the day, if you were over the age of, I've forgotten what it was now, they weren't even, law schools weren't even admitting people at that time. Mm-hmm. Can we still grow them and then use their years of wisdom and knowledge and working on the front lines to, propel them into
I have an idiosyncratic answer to that. And that is that I kind of see what I'm seeing with law school debt, the debt people take on, and the way people's personalities are changed as they try and pay down that debt. It just warps people. I'd rather have those same people continue to work as an organizer in a different capacity than have them take on $50,000, $80,000, $100,000 of debt and spend the rest of their lives digging themselves out of the hole.
I think I have a little bit of a different perspective. Sorry, Michael. So I did a non-traditional program. So I continued working while I went to school, and I did what UC calls a flex time program. So it took me longer, but it was not a part-time program. It wasn't like a separate program at night or anything. It was the ability to be flexible in your schedule, to reduce your coursework to the point where you could balance that. And so, I think that was the reason I was able to go to law school, right? Because I was in, had a house, and, I wasn't able to just stop everything and take on law school and stop working. And I was afraid that I was going to be the only kind of like non-traditional student. And that's not true, actually. I found a lot of what I would consider non-traditional students who had done other things and figured out that they wanted to try to be a lawyer. So, I think there are paths, but I also would agree that there's, law school sometimes seems to be a little bit more behind in terms of finding ways to be flexible than other types of programs and other types of education. It's still pretty traditional.
Did you get stuck with a lot of debt?
No, I did not. I didn't have that experience, but that's because of the way that I approached it. So I think that it just depends. It depends on how you do it. And there are part-time programs throughout this. I mean, there's at least one in the Cincinnati area. There's one in the Columbus area. So it just depends. But I do see Eric's point that it can really, there is a way that it really prioritizes money. If we're just being honest, I mean, it really just prioritizes money.
The forces of capital are strong.
Mm-hmm.
Psychologically as well as economically. Let's talk about a different twist on that. To the extent we have someone who is a law student who'd be interested in this, and they reach out, what could we collectively as a group do to get them the opportunities they need to steer them in the direction of doing co-op law or co-op representation as part of a community lawyering practice? What can we do to get them the backup they need to stick to that, to countervail the internship with a big law firm or the instinct to go work in a judicial clerkship?
Well, I think legal aid has a role here, right? Because we have money, we bring in interns every year. And if we can bring those interns into our community development practice and they can see the potential of this kind of work, that can have an impact. But again, working at legal aid is a bit of a luxury, right? those people are already coming in. It's just a matter of placing them in the right department. And they're already the kind of people that would be susceptible or would be interested in this kind of work, if only they had exposure to it.
That's interesting, Mike. How many summer associates or interns do you have working on this sort of stuff every year? And how do you get them?
This sort of stuff? How do we get them? We legal aid recruits in the area, and we never have a shortage of them, so we get them from area law schools. And we've had, the interns that have worked with our community engagement practice group, which is the group that I work in at Legal Aid that handles this kind of stuff, this group work. They do a variety of different things. So they're not just working with us, they're also working with other groups. But I think it behooves us to make a more concerted effort to expose them to this kind of work in particular. And I think we need to be more deliberate in figuring out how to do that in a way that would give them the proper introduction, but also the motivation to carry this forward. And we can do that, but we're also geographically limited, right?
I think for me, part of it is kind of inserting yourself in all those panels that they have, like lunchtime, not conferences, but lunchtime panels or brown bag events where law school often invites alumni and experienced attorneys to talk about either an area of expertise or talk about their background. So I've done quite a bit of that when I was with ABLE, and now I'm a little less proactive. But I think there's room to kind of insert ourselves into kind of, I want to talk about it, reach out to a professor and say, hey, I do this area of law. Do you want to have, a day that I come and talking with your students about this? In Texas, at least we have that at least once a week. That would be a lunchtime panel about people attorneys love talking about themselves. So people would just, interviewing tell me about your experience. And people are like happy to share what they've been doing and how they got there, how successful they are. So I think part of it is like, let's do that. We're doing an area that we're passionate about, working that we are passionate about with folks that do great work, and we believe in the impact of it. And I think part of it is just kind of do it as any other corporate attorney would do, or any other judicial appointee would do. It's about their experience. I want to do that. Go to law school. I've done that a couple of times at the UD when I was with Legal Aid, and they reached out to me both because I was with Legal Aid and because of community lawyering work I was doing. So I think it's kind of developing some of that relationship as well.
Let's talk about teaming up on this. Let's get Jackie up into Cleveland when Mike's doing it, and vice versa. And I'll try and go in and add some perspective on how you can do at least a little bit of this from the big firm side.
It sounds great.
The other thing that would be nice that I was thinking on that is we've been talking about lawyering on the co-op side, and I think all of you have run into this in one way or another. One thing that would be great is if we had some community work being done by CPAs, if we had a network of accountants who had the same kind of mindset you all have, who can go in and talk to a potential co-op group about what they'll need in terms of doing a cash flow analysis, in terms of doing a balance sheet and an income statement. Somebody who can talk about how you would apply the CPA skills to development work. Maybe we do a co-session someplace at some law school or some business school on that, and try and also get that pipeline working a little bit, because on the ESOP side, on employee stock ownership plans, there's enough money involved that their accountants are interested in it. The accountants I know who really know co-op accounting tend to have come from the ag side, tend to have come from working with the country marks, the landmarks, etc.
I think you're right. It always cracks me up that in our region, there's this National Society of Accountants for Cooperatives. I was never able to get them into any of my events, or even get into the events. So I think we are lucky that that's in our region, but I think you're right.
I've
Yeah,
never
like
heard
I've
of
been
them.
to
Are
some
they-
of their events, and I felt like I didn't know enough about ag financing, actually.
it's a lot of ag finance professionals, is my understanding. And so I wonder about, and I think, our center works in this space, like how can we get the folks who come from the ag background but really know co-ops as even as big businesses, how can we get them to transfer that knowledge or engage in this other space of cooperatives, because co-ops are so diverse. What does that, how can we build those bridges?
Yeah.
Some I think are already doing it, like people like David Swanson in Minneapolis.
Yep.
He's a big ag guy, but he also works with, small multi-stakeholder cooperatives and sort of stewarding them towards development. But I don't know how broad his reach is. Does anybody else have experience working with him or his firm?
I have experience working with him in a different context, going back to when we have a big client that was acquired by a big ag co-op client,
right,
that was acquired by one of his clients.
To the extent that he could serve as somewhat of an ambassador of sort of, I'm a big ag co-op lawyer, but I've also done this other work, and maybe he can talk to his colleagues to try to convince them to do the same.
Yeah. Are we running out of time on the panel?
I was told you had until 11:30.
Great. Okay.
All right. Is that okay?
That's fine. I just wanted to make sure we weren't running into the 5-minute finish line, and we have
Well,
someone.
I was going to suggest we take a break though, because you've been sitting for a little while. Are you okay with that? Or would you like to continue? It's up to you.
I am going to take a break to refill my tea. I'll be right back.
So why don't we take 5? Okay. All right. So that means you will return at, let's make it 10:35, 6 minutes.
Okay.
Paloma. Oh no, Cynthia. I invited Little Africa to the conference. I wonder they would need to how much is it for them to attend?
Oh, at this point, which part were they going to come to?
They were going to come in. I wanted them to get an opportunity to meet the people in this session, and they weren't aware of it. I feel like, I take responsibility.
If you can invite them to come into this session, and I'll let them in to the rest of this session, and then I'll have to check with any. Do you know how to do that?
Tell me.
Okay. I'm asking you because I'm not sure. This was Clancy's thing, and Clancy's having a baby today, so
I wonder if I just take the URL and put it
just
into
send
a fresh link. Will that automatically take me in?
Does he have Hopin already?
That's what I know that they would have to get. It is taking me automatically in, but I wonder if it's doing that because it knows that I'm already logged in.
Yeah, it knows you're already there. Because otherwise it's my understanding you'd have to be registered.
For Hopin or for the conference?
For the conference itself, for that link to work, I believe it would have to be. Let me check for a sec, okay? I'll be right back.
Okay.
Well, I apologize for the jumping in and out. My computer is failing me. I'm on my phone now.
Matt, no worries. I had assumed that you have what's going on with me, which is that you have a lot of users on your Wi-Fi connection and that you're running out of bandwidth.
streaming movies right now.
We had at one point at work a glitch in our timing on connection to the interload. And what we found out is that one of my partners was downloading every Fish live concert he could find.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing.
Oh, is this the female partner? What's her name? Is that who you're talking about?
No.
Okay, because I met sort of virtually. She's on the Able board actually too. I met her and she's a Fish fan.
He's a big Fish fan. Yeah, no, the person who did it was a third person who's a friend of both of ours.
Gotcha.
Michelle.
Yep, Michelle.
Michelle's awesome. Michelle has managed. You think you laugh at what I do with limited amounts of bandwidth for co-op work. It would be great for the world if Michelle could do immigration law full time.
Yeah, she's really into that for sure.
She's really good at it.
Yeah, she do unemployment or employment work.
She does employment work. She does HR compliance. She does labor law too.
Yeah.
She's a management side labor lawyer, as if you look on paper, but she's really an immigration lawyer doing enough management side employment law to stay alive.
Right.
Jackie, how long has it been since we talked? Other than exchanging emails, are you familiar with the fact that I am in the process of winding down my practice, and when people need referrals, you're a name I throw out?
Yeah, no, I might have heard something from Matt, but not in those terms. I thought it was like it was over your head eventually in the next few years. Now that you're actually winding down.
Yeah, I am planning to retire on my 62nd birthday.
And when is that?
For a while, I was saying December 31st, but there's a fairly big project for a healthcare client that I won't have done by the end of the year.
Wow. And are you going to move across the country?
I've been thinking about it, but that's complicated.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, you feel free to send people my way. Next year, though, not this year. We're not.
I understand. And I'm going to keep my hand in co-op law somehow. So we'll figure it out.
We should talk about it if you want to do that, a few hours a month.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sort of was part of my question, which is like, how do we ensure, Eric, that like the knowledge that you have can be beneficial for newer attorneys who want to get involved in this work? And
I just keep stressing the amount of knowledge I have isn't important. It's developing judgment and confidence in your ability and how to evaluate a situation and figure out how some fairly simple rules apply. There are some securities law issues that are complicated. There are a couple tax law issues that are complicated with ag co-ops, but a lot of the real issues doesn't require technical knowledge. It requires judgment.
But Eric, currently people don't have either one.
Yeah, and that's right. I have the technical knowledge.
So let's share the technical and give them the opportunity to go and apply that and find out, like having hard situations to deal with.
Yeah. Hannah, so you're in rural Ohio. The Able service area has 32 counties. Much of it is rural. How do you suggest we start doing this work in rural parts of the state that is not sort of farm co-op law or ag law?
Yeah, that's a really good question. One that we've been thinking about. Because we're here, I think, focused on worker co-ops, but there are relatively few. That's not to say there are none, but there are fewer worker co-ops developing in rural spaces. But that's something that our center has an initiative called the Appalachia Cooperates Initiative to try to build up the network of community developers who are thinking about co-op opportunities in rural areas. So I think one way is to if anybody's interested in engaging with that network, Jackie has presented to that network. If there are opportunities to present, we have a monthly networking call. If that's something that you're interested in joining and just building relationships, I think could be really valuable. And I think, on my note here, I have, how do we build connections between legal aid and co-op developers like we see with Eric and Co-op Cincy throughout rural communities? And part of that is just like, I know of Matt, for example, I know of your organization, Michael, now yours, but like, I don't know where to find that in Eastern Ohio, for example. So if there's connections to your colleagues in Eastern Ohio, if there's connections to your colleagues in West Virginia, I think just connecting people is one of the first places we should start.
And that's where I think Matt and Mike can play a really good role. And because, with the funding that we all got at the time and the legal aids that still get that same funding, there's a platform that was put together and they meet on a regular basis. And even outside of that, kind of the states surrounding us, they meet for training. And I think would be a great opportunity to actually connect you with that as well. So the word can be spread fairly easily there, right?
Yeah. So, for example, Hannah, after the meeting at Jim City Market with the statewide Incubator program a few months ago, I made a connection to the Athens people and Nelsonville. I think had 2 people who were part of that network. From the developer side, I made that connection to the legal aid program out of Lancaster's office. I don't know how it's gone though, right? I just made the connection, sort of like left it at that. But there is a space, I think, for that to happen, as we've talked about a little bit in the past.
Yeah, I think there is certainly a space. And I'll say that that's actually one of the areas that we have as a part of our work plan over the next year is to develop that space. So to build those relationships and to create those, to Eric's point about passing on technical knowledge, if there's ways we can pass on technical knowledge to do that, but then also to develop relationships, which I think gets to Eric's point about developing judgment and truth and understanding.
Yeah, Mike, maybe this is something we should bring up at a task force meeting then.
Yeah. I'm also very interested in developing materials.
Yes.
Not just for lawyers to use, but also, practitioners, people who want to form co-ops to use that may be a little bit more legally oriented than the materials that Hannah, your center, has already put out, like your workbooks. I'm thinking of one client in particular. We're spending a lot of time creating sort of like decision flowcharts, asking certain questions about how they want to be set up. And the ultimate goal would be to take all that information and draft articles and bylaws. But we're going at it at a very slow, deliberate pace. And it's not very linear. We're sort of grabbing decisions out of the air based on conversations that organically sort of developed. But we've created these outlines, these worksheets, and I'm sure they can definitely be improved. They can only be improved. And so I'd love to work with others around the state in creating those types of sort of worksheet, workbook type materials that we can give to folks thinking about starting up co-ops, or give to folks that we're working with as sort of homework to do in parallel with the representation.
Co-op Dayton and Co-op Cincy have both done some serious work on that, and you should get in touch with, I think, Kenya, it'd be Rachel at Co-op Dayton, and either Ellen or Kristen now at Co-op Cincy, because they've gone down that path and they're further ahead than on what you want to do, Michael.
Great.
Okay, does anybody else have anything to add?
So I have a question about an idea. One thing, Matt, that we had talked about at the network meeting a couple months ago now, is understanding if there's opportunity for a co-op type clinic right? Like a pro bono outreach clinic.
Mhm.
So we see this with small businesses, and maybe it's built into a clinic that is a small business clinic with co-op attorneys there as well. But I was just wondering, like brainstorming, throwing spaghetti at the wall, what people think about a clinic opportunity. Would it be valuable? Would you have interest? Is it too soon?
Maybe defer to Eric, because I think Eric may have helped Able do this in Toledo years ago. This idea of a clinic around small businesses.
I did. Annalisa Grida was one of the drivers on that. But we would sit down. The trouble with that is it's such a short-term encounter with somebody you don't know. It's hard for the person to walk in, talk to an attorney they've never met, maybe be the first business attorney they've ever talked to, and get focused in a 30 to 45-minute session on what they really need. I always felt like when I was doing those sessions that it was like the first meeting with a therapist, that you were just barely trying to figure out what the real problem was.
Yeah. And Jack, maybe talk about the Incubator co-op Dayton had that you were presenting at a couple years ago.
Yeah, I thought that was a very useful model. So there was kind of working with the Incubator. So I went a few sessions, legal sessions throughout their program, maybe 2, got to know the projects at those instances. So I attended some of those events just because I was interested in learning with them as well. And then at the end, I had my full legal session and offered both one session, an hour with me, with everybody that was in the program as groups. And then I would use that both to understand what their legal needs were, what I could do or not, and how to refer them to then another kind of pro bono clinic that I called as well. So I reached out to a handful of attorneys that would meet, I think maybe 3 attorneys, and each one of them met 1 or 2 teams that were more ready and more ready to legal services, in the sense that they were less scary to an attorney that was not used to working with that sort of group, right? So they had like a fairly easy scope that was either a formation or a contract they were dealing with, or they were well established enough that could lead to a one-time thing, either the one question or a quick follow-up. And I thought that way was actually super helpful and led to the formation of maybe 3 or 4 cooperatives in the past couple of years, or at least really addressing any immediate legal need. So I think that's kind of a form that I found that was more helpful both to the attorney and to the teams, that kind of like integrate the attorney through some of the educational process, and then do a clinic afterwards. Then the clinics that I did that were kind of more similar to what Annalise did in Toledo, that was kind of on one thing, address a few questions. Nobody really knows what are their needs, and then it stops there. It's good for the private attorney because they don't have to think much about it afterwards, but also let them feeling like Eric is just like, but I don't feel like I'm doing anything. The team might come out with feeling kind of comforted in their decision or where their question, but really on both ends is kind of still left hanging.
The positive encounters I had doing clinics like that, in one case, I had somebody who needed expanded retail space. They gotten to the point where they needed to deal with a commercial landlord for the first time, helping them with their lease. And that was brilliant because they came in knowing what they needed, and I was able to give them concrete answers for what to ask for. Another case, I talked to somebody who was thinking about, gee, we're at the point, should we shut down? Should we file for bankruptcy? Should we talk to the person who loaned us the money we needed to start up? And I was able to help them walk through the game tree. They ended up deciding to negotiate with the neighborhood person who had lent them the money and get them through to the point where they could keep the business going rather than filing for bankruptcy or liquidating. But there are a lot of things where it's just, gee, I don't know where to start. You and your brother own a business and you can't get along. Let's talk about all the different issues about how you could sort that out.
So it sounds like most successful when it's paired with a longer term engagement.
Yep. With some follow-up.
Yeah.
And I think, Hannah, your center is way better placed than most because of your, legal expertise and kind of at least being able to issue spot and help kind of filter some of those that just need to attend an educational session with those that have a very clear legal question or legal issue and those that need a deliverable, for example.
Hannah, did that answer your question, or was it helpful?
Yeah, thank you.
Let me ask a question, and this is oriented. I think Kenya has dropped off, but one of the things Kenya wanted us to bid on that I was not able to get one of my full-time securities, small business development, VC lawyer, venture capital fund lawyers to give her a bid on, even though he wanted to work on, was exactly parallel to the issues Mike and I have been working on for Cleveland Community Solar. At some point, what we might want to do as a token example of how do we pass on, how do we share knowledge, we might want to sit down and do a session for a variety of co-op lawyers about how can a co-op take investments from people who aren't actually worker members, or in the case of an ag co-op, aren't actually farmers buying or selling product through the co-op. Talk about the security law issues and share. I'm not sure I can say knowledge because the knowledge doesn't help. Ohio law just is not well set up to take money from angel investors who are not accredited, but have a working session among the people who are working in this area about what can we do when we have a co-op in the Co-op Cincy network, a co-op in the Co-op Dayton network, a co-op in the Cleveland area, a co-op in Akron or Athens or Toledo, who does want to take community money. What advice collectively can we offer them? And let's try and make sure we're taking advantage of what each of us knows. I don't know if you have this issue when you work on clients in other states, Jackie, but I've just found it huge problem that Co-op Dayton and Co-op Cincy both can get neighborhood people to invest in worker co-ops if we could find a way for them to do it. And Mike ran into the same issue with one of the clients he's working heavily with one of Jonathan Weller's co-ops.
Yeah, it's so weird because I don't feel like I have that issue in other states. It feels either more clear or because my colleagues have more of that expertise. It feels easier and less risky versus Ohio, where I have most of my experience. I have no idea. It just feels so risky and unclear. And so I think you're right. There's a huge need there. I can advise in like 5 other states about their securities exemption and how that work or not.
I know exactly how it works in Florida, for instance.
Right.
I have a pretty good idea of how to walk through the path in North Carolina. I know it can't be done in New York if anybody has like a
New
Buffalo.
York, Colorado, even California, it's easier to understand than Ohio on that aspect.
A second topic we probably want to share knowledge about at some point. And this is going to become an issue, I think, pretty rapidly on Co-op Cincy when they do more, when they help more groups of employees buy existing businesses, is how do you do a hybrid co-op that is both a worker co-op and still has equity held by the seller, not as a member of the co-op? How do you structure that second class of that founder's stock that's still common but isn't membership stock? And I'd be happy at some point to sit down and talk people through the way I think about that, the way I think about being able to maintain co-op status, even though there's a second class of equity that isn't co-op membership stock. That's kind of a weird multi-stakeholder co-op.
Yeah, I think both those would be great topics, Eric. I would love to sit down and learn from you about that. Mike, too, if you're working through it with up there, especially the first issue, I mean, I'd love to get your thoughts on it as well.
I'd also love to participate and learn from others. We're still with the solar group. We're still trying to work through these things. We don't have our answers yet. We're still trying to figure it out.
So on this point, one of the areas we were planning to work on in the next year is educational sessions on co-op legal topics. So I'm taking notes. What are some others? And so there's kind of a two-pronged, I feel like, issue here. One is these topics that you just mentioned are for attorneys who know co-ops, right? They have a baseline level of understanding.
This is kind of a working session rather than a training session. I know Matt said he'd like to learn what I think, but it's more about we work through the problem together.
Right.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
What are the other ones, for example, for getting attorneys who are maybe not familiar with co-ops engaged? So two questions.
Two
what
huge
do you want to know,
ones.
and what do you want others to know?
Two huge ones, at least on the worker co-op side, are how do you phase someone into membership? How do probationary memberships work when someone has not yet finished buying their membership stock or paying their membership initiation fee? What rights do they have? What responsibilities do they have? How do their transactions in that probationary period get counted towards their share of earnings? That's one I've worked through a lot, especially with startup co-ops where maybe the only member is the founder at day one. I don't think that ever comes up with farmer co-ops, Hannah. I haven't seen an equivalent issue. A second issue that is huge for the people it hits is on a worker co-op. How do you handle payroll? How do you respond when the IRS says you haven't handled the payroll taxes on patronage distributions correctly? And again, that's not going to come up for ag co-ops or marketing co-ops very often, but for worker co-ops, every time it comes up, it's a panic issue because the IRS comes in and says, you've underpaid your FICA.
And I think a issue in between those is really just structuring membership.
Yep.
For one, right? Like board members, how do you even get to that? And then as a sub issue is membership versus stock cooperative.
Right.
Even on the stock cooperative, I started separating those because they are two separate concepts. You have a membership in it, and you may have a stock in it that will be part of your membership requirement. So kind of like bifurcating that is kind of important. And I've found that that's something that we need to clarify early on for people getting into that work.
Yeah, and that is actually huge because for a lot of co-ops, I like to build in the flexibility to issue preferred stock, but you can't issue preferred stock without issuing membership stock.
Right. Which really, you can just do as a comment in your membership. Subchapter T, I've grown to love talk about to co-op taxation and just kind of understanding that it's a mixing between corporations.
Yeah, when I walked one of my tax colleagues who does a lot of real estate and deals a lot with S corporations through co-op tax, I saw a light bulb go off in his head at some point about how wonderful it could be if all of your income is patronage income, being able to turn on and turn off pass-through treatment. Another topic that we probably should talk about at some point, and this is more of interest to lawyers maybe and developers than people who are in existing co-ops, is multi-stakeholder co-ops. How do you walk people through the conversation about what part of the board represents each constituency? How do you divide up the patronage? If you have, for instance, I worked a lot 6-7 years ago with a food co-op, a retail food co-op that also wanted to be a worker co-op. And their decision making, one of the hardest things they had to do was decide what portion of the patronage to reserve for the workers.
Yeah, we did that. Jim Shumaker did that. I think it was like a 60-40 or 70-30 in favor of the workers.
Yeah. And it's not that there's any legal rules on that. It's just how do you get to a decision point that everyone's willing to live with?
Yeah, exactly. So Hannah, I mean, the idea of these training opportunities, I mean, it's a great idea. And I know, I mentioned this when we spoke last time, this idea of like doing one for Ohio attorneys. And I have been completely negligent in following up on that. So, I mean, I think like maybe collaborating with the legal aid programs would be a great idea for this, right? And then we can open it up to others as well.
Yeah, I would really like to do that.
Definitely.
And
And all
we talked
these-
about, Matt, incentivizing attendance with CLE. I mean, if there's other opportunities people see to like get people engaged, I'm happy to think about that too.
Yeah, that sounds great. What are you saying, Mike?
I'm not sure what I was saying. Another topic that I would love to learn more about, and this doesn't go to sort of bringing other lawyers into the fold, but rather training the ones already doing this work. And it's similar, Jackie, to what you were talking about with Subchapter T. As someone who isn't as familiar with Subchapter T as they should be, like, what are the tax issues that need to be considered up front, right? Like, what do you need to know at the beginning to competently guide a startup co-op through the process when it comes to Subchapter T and tax?
Mike, I wouldn't be too hard on yourself either. Almost daily, I will tell somebody, like, here is the big picture view on this. You need to talk to a cooperative accountant, and here is a number. You could.
Yeah.
Because like the first year is not even a problem, right? The first 2 years until they have surplus, it's not going to be a problem. So they need to understand really big picture, make a somewhat informed decision, and knowing that that's not going to matter for a while.
I concur with that, but the thing that really surprises me is what really starts mattering is when you have reserves and investment income that's not attributable to anybody's work. That's the point at which the rubber hits the road and understanding what's a Subchapter T patronage distribution.
But then the treatment is going to be the same regardless, because it's going to be taxed at the corporation level.
Yeah. But people always want to try and figure out a way to turn that investment income into patronage business so they can distribute it.
Yeah. So part of that, Hannah, maybe it is kind of like learning more about patronage and like tracing it. I've been talking a lot about that with clients. I can tell you what it is patronage. I can help you define patronage, but the team, they also need to figure out how to track it and put that formula on a spreadsheet, but learn how to track it. Is that in hours? You just have a quick formula. Like with platform cooperatives is becoming a nightmare because some of them want to do like, commenting on, retweeting, or sharing information about this is patronage. Sure, I don't think legal is a big deal. How do you keep track of that?
Right. And that's something that we've, when we have talked with groups and we do presentations on the financial systems of cooperatives, right? And usually at the end of it, people are like, oh my gosh, I had no idea how complicated it was going to be to like figure all of this out. And so helping people understand the record keeping needs is a really big deal. So yeah, I think tying into like practical information from, for example, accountants about how to maintain your records and bookkeeping, and so that you have accurate member accounts.
Yeah. Another question we deal with a lot, and it's similar to something Eric brought up with regard to worker cooperatives, is how should founders or early, those who are putting this co-op together, how can they be compensated for their sweat equity, right, before the co-op starts? How does that convert to patronage, if that's how you want to do it? Just especially when working with communities with low incomes. I mean, people want to know what I'm doing this. By doing this, I'm sacrificing other income that I could be making.
Yeah.
What do I get out of
in
this
the evening instead of doing overtime at my day job?
Right.
Yeah. So we're, I think, over time here. I just want to be recognized that.
Yeah, we're doing really still pretty good on time. At the same time, I noticed that we have a total of about 14 people here, and I thought
it stopped at 11. I'm sorry, it stopped at 11:30.
Yeah, let's open it up for questions from other people.
Yes, let's do a Q&A right now. Let's see if I can find anything in the Q&A. I don't see anything there.
It says
so if you have questions, you can either write them in the chat or you can speak up.
Yeah, and then there are like 3 people I don't know: Brian, Redding, Mark, working, and well, I think that's 2 now on the chat. So if you guys have anything you want to share with us.
I don't know what happened to my video. Really weird. Oh, I think it's okay. Anybody want to share or have questions? No.
Something that, I mean, I don't even, does anybody know whether you can read law in Ohio? Can you join the bar without going to law school?
I don't think you can.
No.
No, I don't think you
You
can.
People
cannot.
familiar with Selk's Radical Real Estate Law School?
I was on a listserv and saw a reference and thought, gee, if I have more time, I ought to do that. But haven't.
It's one of these things that just sounds crazy. And it's so incredible that they're actually doing it. But they're teaching workers law in developing these radical sort of real estate solutions to cooperative ownership of land and housing. In developing these models, those who are working on it are being taught law outside of law school. So they're reading law while going through this program to become lawyers in California. So at the end of the program, they take the bar and they pass and they're lawyers. And they've learned they've been working on developing these new models of collective ownership of land in the process.
That's awesome.
It's incredible.
Yeah, Vermont's another state where you can read for the bar. I think you have to have an apprenticeship for like 5 or 6 years, and you can sit for the bar exam.
For what state, Matt?
Vermont.
Oh, yeah.
I think Montana used to have it too.
But that's the kind of program that it seems so innovative. And it was the seed of such a creative idea that I'm sure at the beginning people had the reaction that I had, like, how can you possibly put that together? But they're doing it.
Yeah, I think that's that is a good idea. It's similar again to what I was wondering if there was anything of that nature for those of us who are older. Did you see what Kenya wrote in the chat earlier? She wrote down that what was it? Her comment about sign her up. She said, "Find me a scholarship, I would go."
Right.
Yep.
No.
That's what prompted me to think about it.
Yeah.
But I mean, even if that doesn't work in Ohio, right? Because you can't read law.
Right.
The creativity behind that kind of program and that idea.
Let's
is
take
so
a step
inspiring.
beyond that, Michael. Even beyond reading law, just put on a presentation where we teach community organizers to do real estate law if they need to form land trusts, or to do tax clinics if we're worried about people's wages being garnished by the IRS. Just the idea of giving people the skills to represent themselves. I know in some areas, the National Lawyers Guild, especially I think in New York and the East Coast, has done some programs where they're empowering people who are non-lawyers to take control of their own legal affairs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the grail, right? That's the end result of all community lawyering work is that the lawyers disappear.
Right. No need for us anymore if the legal system worked right.
Yeah, well, you're empowering, the masses. You're doing that. Empowering the people. But it also takes the money away, as we talked about earlier. It's no longer the big thing. But,
just thinking about what I just said, maybe one reach out we should do is find anyone in Ohio in the National Lawyers Guild who isn't working almost entirely on criminal or immigration issues, and see if the Ohio chapter of the National Lawyers Guild would be interested in co-sponsoring a program. Get some more lawyers who are doing community lawyering in to learn about this thing that may be more corporate than what they've ever handled before.
Okay. I know the folks up here in Northeast Ohio, in the Cleveland area, who are involved in NLG. It's not as robust as I think it used to be, but
it's not as robust. The only people I really know in Toledo who are doing it, and she's not in Toledo right now, is Reem. Have you worked with Reem at all, Matt?
Remi's works with Matt and his practice.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Right. And she's also, as far as I can tell, the National Lawyers Guild in my corner of the state.
Okay, you're on mute, Matt.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Now we
I
can.
feel
Yeah.
like I'm like getting part of the conversation about the NLG. What was the question about the NLG?
Oh, the question was, is there a way that we can reach out to some people in the Ohio NLG who have some bandwidth and are interested,
I
have
think I
some
can hear
energy
Eric
to do
keep
something
talking.
other than immigration law or criminal practice and say, hey, we'd like to co-sponsor a program as part of development of a community lawyering thing. Here's how we can do some community organization through worker co-ops. Get a session going that way. Matt, you disappeared again. I'm sorry.
Jackie, I feel like you were going to say something earlier.
I don't think I was laughing.
Yeah.
But I did. I still have in my mind that cooperative conference I've done with now in the past couple of years, and I'd love to do that again next year. So it could be kind of like a summary or from those trainings that might be a little too detailed for us for a conference like that. That's also an opportunity to get people in the door and get them CLE, and that's fun.
One of the things we would do if we did at least part of that as an intro to co-op program is we would get some people who are interested and might be motivated to put some energy into this who wouldn't otherwise.
I'd really like to think about how we could, I would love to be involved in that again as well, Jackie. I'd like to think about how we can get rural entrepreneurs and attorneys involved in something like that as well. I don't know if that has to do with how we do outreach or where we host it or what that looks like, but I think that we can do better there.
Yeah, I remember Catherine, I think Caroline Ezelgroth.
Right.
Her concerns, though, were fairly similar to you, Eric's, with like, I'd love to be involved with it, but I have other paying clients that I need to work on, and I have only so many hours that I even can put for the training. But she was extremely interested, and I think her being ready, kind of have joined a little bit us in this, could be insightful in how to approach that as well.
Great.
So I think I might have missed a lot of the conversation that just happened. I had to log off and log back on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we decided you're doing it all.
I hope not. It's never going to happen, Eric.
Okay. Yeah, what Jackie was saying is let's make sure we involve Carolyn, who was at the conference in Dayton, and see if we can make more of a reach out to rural entrepreneurs, farmers, make sure we have a broad bandwidth rather than being an urban focused only.
On Wednesday, I'm doing a CLE for the Dana Corporation, which I think is up near Toledo. Is that right, Eric?
Yeah, that's a client of mine.
Yeah, for their attorneys. And it's going to be like co-ops and how you get involved in the pro bono field. So if there's any ideas you guys have that I could be talking about with that, I mean, I'm happy to talk about it.
Let's set up a call. I don't know who your contact in the law department is, but mention to them that I work with Lisa Amond regularly on a totally different set of issues. I do Dana's pension work.
Okay.
But I would love to be involved with that if it helps.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you free on Monday, Eric? This is a Wednesday thing that's happening.
I am free on Monday. Well, I'm free enough. I have some calls, but I can juggle some time.
All right. Well, I'll send you an email then and we'll figure something out.
Yeah. It's interesting because I would not have expected Dana to be doing that. There is something going on there that I don't know about, but that's because I've got a very narrow slice of their reality. I deal with one lawyer in the law department and a couple HR people.
Okay.
But that's the other thing. It reminds me, corporate attorneys in corporations are also a really good resource, right? So like ABLE uses a lot folks from what's the gas company?
Marathon.
Right, Marathon. They provide a good amount of support and pro bono work for ABLE's clients and legal aid clients. And I think they have the corporate expertise, right? So that allows them less of the billable hour concern as well. They have maybe more flexibility on that end, have some of the expertise, and can be use that also maybe as a training to see what else is going in the corporate world that they can get involved with, and also as a future career option. Why not?
And just to switch sides around, I didn't see Casey on this call at all, but we might also, if we're talking about community lawyering and some people who can provide some legal resources, talk to the union side labor firms.
I think Casey's on another panel, actually.
Okay.
That's also something that UC Law does an entrepreneur clinic, and it's actually in partnership with Duke Energy. So I think their law department is engaged with that.
That's interesting. I'm used to thinking on the environmental stuff I do, and my environmental stuff isn't through my firm, just to get you a tie. It's more like Terry Lodge's environmental stuff. But Duke Energy is usually thought of as not being a good corporate player. That's because of their commitment to fossil fuels.
I'd like to hear people's thoughts on something that's totally separate from this sort of training conversation.
Yes.
Which is, what do folks think about the potential in Ohio for passing legislation similar to what they passed in California to make small investments in cooperatives easier? You know, like $1,000 cap on investments from individuals aren't securities, so long as they meet a certain set of qualifications. What's the potential for that here?
I don't think we know.
Yeah.
We should try it though.
I mean, if we could get Policy Matters Ohio interested in something like that, I wonder if they could get it through.
Right. And then you have other organizers on the ground with the centers, right? There's like, we have at least four cooperative development centers in Ohio.
Yeah.
I think you need the R's involved, not the D's.
Yeah, that was why
it's entrepreneurship, right? It's business.
Yeah, exactly. That's the easiest. I think easiest.
No, I get that. I'm just saying, like, who should be
You're
like
right.
who you reach out to about it, right?
Right.
To get support for it.
And Selk has draft bills.
Yeah, back in the day, in the 70s and early 80s, when ESOPs were just starting to be a thing, there were a lot of Republican supporters for spreading ownership among employees. There were a lot of people who thought that's a lot better answer than some of the other things we could be doing with our energy. Maybe we can get the same kind of thing going with Ohio Republicans.
But I don't know, if we got something like that on the books, it would make a lot of these questions so much easier to answer.
And you think we should be partnering with whom again, Michael?
My first thought was Policy Matters Ohio, because they're sort of the lobbying group in Ohio that works most on issues that affect legal aids clients. But there could be others as well.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense, Mike. I'm just saying, I don't know that they're the best to get something passed in the current state house.
Yeah.
You certainly want the first person who introduces the bill to be an R.
Yeah. Well, Matt, do you know of any other sort of organizations that would be interested in pursuing something like this?
I'm sure you sort of broke up there on me.
Do you know of other organizations besides Policy Matters Ohio that may be interested in pursuing something like this? Maybe organizations with a more neutral reputation.
Yeah, there's one that has done some eviction work that may be worth, I think they're more centrist, maybe worth talking to. If I can find out the name of the group. I can't remember who they are, though. The other thing is just to talk to like Megan Odell at OPLC to see her thoughts on this.
Mm-hmm. Megan Odell.
One other thought I had, is there any kind of overarching group that is helping the various university tech incubators? I know at least 5 universities in Ohio have these kind of tech incubators that start up that act as shelters, and they may have an interest in supporting that kind of effort too.
It's like the Third Frontier Ohio or something like that.
Yeah,
I
like
think.
that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If we pitch it right, they'd have an interest in it.
Mike, we should talk about this at a task force meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
You said working with whom again? I'm just picking up on that. Any university overarching group working with?
It's actually just like Hannah's working with an extension part of OSU that does co-op development. A lot of the universities have tech incubators that provide technical assistance, space, administrative support for startup tech companies.
Yeah.
And what we want to do, you said Third Frontier, Matt. That name rings a bell, but I haven't worked with them. I guess I'm not techie enough.
Yeah, it's like a state agency or group that's out there to support, tech now, like essentially like, tech in cities. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Hannah, you're nodding your head. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's actually a program. Third Frontier is I would have to go back to my colleagues, but it's essentially kind of a sister program, I think, to like SBDC and PTAC and all of those programs out of the Ohio Development Services Agency. I think it runs through there, but I would have to check. So, like, for example, I know Ohio University has a program focused on tech development that I think falls under Third Frontier. I can see if I can get more information.
Okay, so
Cynthia, I'm sorry. The question you had about a tech company, that might also be a route to get assistance for that company, is finding a Third Frontier or similar partner in the area. I don't know about legal work, for example, but technical assistance.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Often perfecting copyright or patent rights, you can sort of squeeze into technical assistance. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit different than thinking about doing a buy-sell agreement or doing litigation.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I'm looking at the time. It's 11:21, and I think you all have done a fantastic job so far. So unless there are additional questions or comments, does anybody want to, speakers, Jacqueline, Eric, and Matt, do you have any final comments you'd like to make before we wrap up?
I would just say, how are we going to continue this conversation? Because I think it was a great conversation. I really appreciate everybody joining and participating in this.
Yes.
I'm not sure about the other people who are silent, but it'd be great if we could get the 6 people whose face on the screen on a call about once a month to talk about keeping momentum. And any of the rest of the folks are welcome to join as well.
Definitely.
That'd be great.
And we should make sure that Co-op Dayton is as well.
Okay.
So I think at least going forward, Jonathan Wellick, Co-op Cynthia, and Co-op Dayton are great sources of feed through for legal work in this area. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily paying legal work, but legal work.
All right. And Jacqueline?
It's been great. I'm always excited to see these friendly faces, and yeah, I'd love to keep having the conversation and actually get some of the training, the brainstorming that sometimes we don't do as much with folks from outside of our practice or our firm. So it'd be fantastic to keep going on into the next year.
Is it something that someone from on this call would like to take on organizing?
I can try to give it a shot.
Okay, Michael.
Thanks, Mike.
I appreciate that.
You
Okay,
know
so
how to reach me, so that's good. That helps.
Yeah, I talk to everybody on this
I
call
was gonna
fairly
say-
regularly anyway.
if we have everyone's contact information, let's see, Hannah, you put yours in the chat, and
Mike, you know you can touch with me.
Yeah.
yep. Everybody else, I get in touch with everybody. Hannah, I know you have mine, and for some reason I can't even write in the chat anymore. I think I got this little GIF thing going. All right, so again, thank you all. Is it snowing there where you are, Eric?
It was
Not yet.
It was barely snowing this morning, a little bit in Cleveland.
A little bit in Cleveland. Oh, that's right, Cleveland.
Nothing in Dayton yet.
Yeah,
It's overnight
it's in
in
our
Currie.
forecast for tomorrow. 70% chance tomorrow. Yeah. So it was a little nippy out there this morning. I can understand why. It's just a
Yep.
precursor for things to come. Thank you
Sorry,
so
I
much.
thought about driving down to an in-person session. When I saw this was virtual, I decided to stay home, and I haven't left the house yet.
I know this is spoil lots of folk. I'm telling you, but to some extent, I think it's brought more people together. It's a weird thing, but just think about it. The fact that we could have hundreds of individuals on the same call, and from different parts of the United States or the world for that matter, and we're connected. It's just amazing. So
It's true. On the other hand, I will say that I feel a lot more confidence that I know Jackie and Mike because I ran into them at prior versions
okay,
of this conference.
okay,
I was
great.
going to say, I'm so grateful to Co-op Cincy for putting this together, because at the very start of this learning process, it was the symposium a couple of years ago.
That's right. It was my first as well when I joined ABLE. It was
Wow.
your guys' event in 2017, I think.
Wow. So we must carry on the tradition.
Yeah.
We'll see you next year and before, perhaps. I'm really looking forward to hearing what happens as a result of your getting together. Make sure that we're all included, in
Will do.
whatever communications you have. Thanks so
Cynthia
much.
and Hannah,
One
so
of the
great
things I
to
hope
see
that
you both.
happens, Cynthia, is that when you have co-ops coming through something like the Power in Numbers program or the Co-op U, there'll be more people to turn to who can help you get things done.
Definitely. This has been great. Great. Thanks so much. I'm going to go check on Clancy to see if he's had his little one yet.
Oh,
Thanks, everybody.
And Catherine regrets that she couldn't come this morning. She really wanted to. So sorry about that.
I did see that in the comments, but thank you for
We'll include her on these calls, these monthly calls, Mike.
Will do.
Okay. All right.
Bye,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.
Have a good day.
You too.